Okay, so I have no idea the quality of this recording. I spent the last 5 hours trying to get some of this software to work, and it has been an interesting ordeal. So yeah, I had been going back and forth trying to decide whether or not I was going to go back to doing video or simply staying with the podcast. And my preference was to do a video, but the old way of doing videos was just way too time consuming and insane. Um, I mean, it involved trying to record video with a digital camera and um, then reconvert, like convert the format and try to upload it. And it was just a huge time consuming process and a really big hassle. Hence the less than stellar quality of this recording because it's being run through a webcam. And the webcam itself is probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old maybe. So yeah, there's that. Um, a lot has occurred since the last podcast, and I had wanted to do another upload, and time and situations just haven't allowed. So there's a lot that I want to go into in this video. It's going to be scattered. I can go ahead and tell you that. To start with, I will mention in some of the podcasts I had talked about a group that I'm in on Facebook for people who are interested in Gardnerian Wicca. And if you if you followed down that path and found the group, then you already know what I'm about to say. But either way, there's also another group, sort of page thing that I came across recently called Gard Colin. If you type in that GARDCON on Facebook in a search, you'll find basically they're posting videos where these Gardnerians are posting videos and talking about the craft and their practice, and a lot of it's really interesting. I've watched a lot of those over the past few days, so I would definitely recommend that you check that out. So yeah, that's one thing. You'll have to overlook me. I'm a little scattered because, as it usually occurs, it's after 5 in the morning, and I haven't had a lot of sleep. So, but it seems to me that there were some other things that I was going to mention as far as updates are concerned, but I don't know what they are. Ralph. I really don't know how to get into some of this stuff. As I usually say, it's complicated and it's messy. Um, I have recently watched some videos about this upcoming eclipse, and particularly relating to my sign, I'm Pisces, and one of the overviews that people talk about is this whole idea of sort of reaching a crossroads and being in a place where you have to make a decision that possibly involves closure, where you're saying goodbye to someone, or there's a splitting of paths or whatever, and that has happened in my own personal life recently, and I think for very good reason. Um, at the same time, in my mind, it's always a tragedy, to reach an impasse like that, because really what it speaks to is, I hate to use the word failure, but it speaks to It speaks to a failure of communication and connection. You know, when you're trying to interact with someone, I mean, if there's a wall between you and them, you can extend effort, you know, to try to bridge that, or have some sense of communion or common ground, you know, or mutual respect. But I will say that word in quotations because I think mutual respect is really important. And if you don't have that between you and them, no matter your differences, you're going to have some serious problems. And really, that's what it came down to with me and the person I was talking about. I feel like I was trying to give them respect, even though we have drastically different views on certain things. But I don't feel that that respect was given back to me. And there's not much you can do in a situation like that, but unfortunately walk away from it. Um, Particularly if there's a lot of emotion involved, and if it's sort of volatile, you know. I just don't see the sense in dragging yourself further through a difficult situation if there's not likely some kind of resolution that you can find. So yeah, that was the thing that has occurred recently, and it has spawned some of these things that I wrote down here that I want to talk about. Uh, the first part of that is what I would call "quote unquote" justified right. I have met a lot of people in my life over the years who, for various reasons, have certain ideas, and sort of on this mental plane, for these individuals, those ideas become like a truth. But unfortunately, there's a disconnect because they don't realize that truth is personal, it's biased, it's subjective. So for them, their truth becomes truth for the world. And I mean, you know, that in and of itself is a biased decision. It's a biased view, but um, if you have that kind of personal truth and you push it on other people, then you sort of become a bully in a way, you know. And on another personal level of quote unquote biased or whatever, I perceive that as a fault, you know, as an issue at the very least. A fault, you know, sort of you're going into a space of judgment, and I don't want to do that. But what I'm trying to get at here is I think it's really important to be able to, at the very least, say to yourself, I could be wrong, and my views are for me and my path. I mean, they come from the biased, preconceived notions that I have, and it's all about your experiences and things you've read, things you've seen, conversations you've had, you know, personal experiences that you've had in your life, and so it's all very colored. Um, but yeah, I really wish that there was some type of metaphysical explosion in the universe where people understood that truth and opinion, it's all biased and it's all personal, and I think we should all be able to walk our own path, you know, in sort of a peaceful way, and be okay, and still be able to have a conversation with someone who's going in a different direction, and that not be a bad thing. um, I feel like we're living in a time where there's so much separation between people because of ideals. And that's unfortunate. Um, it's just sad to me. It's very sad. So yeah, I do think there's value in being able to question, you know, the things that you come up with, your own theories and stuff like that. I can only say from my own personal experience that certainly if you have an epiphany, like if you have a conversation with someone, or you read an article, or whatever, if you have a moment where you're like, oh crap, I was really wrong about that, some of that is kind of uncomfortable because it attacks the ego, you know. At the same time, you have to understand that you're gaining deeper insight. I mean, you're really making progress on your own spiritual journey through life when the veil is lifted, quote unquote, like when you can see past some bullshit that you had integrated, or held on to, and then you have a moment of clarity where you can kind of see through it. Like that's a gift to you from the universe or from yourself, or wherever. It's still, I think that's a very good thing. So, I think it's important to set that ego aside, and even if it's damaged or whatever, understand that it's just a thing. Like you just have to let that go and value the learning and value the progress of moving forward. Um, for me, at least on my own personal journey, like moving forward is more important than the rest of it. And this sort of leads me into something else I've noticed recently. And there again, this is an opinionated little ramble, so you may not agree with what I'm about to say, and if you don't agree, that is totally cool. Like, I'm not saying that you're wrong or I'm right or whatever. Like, that's highly irrelevant to me, but part of the reason why I'm making these videos is because I do have these opinions and I want to share them. I feel that they're valuable. Um, it just seems important. So I'm going to get into this, and I'll give a small example. This is something I've talked about before. I've written blog posts about it. I see it almost every day, everywhere, particularly on the internet, but I mean in real life as well. And this is a real life example to a degree. So I go to Twitter earlier today, and um, there was some protest slash rally thing somewhere, and this person on Twitter had posted these pictures of these people who identify as witches, and they're there with these signs, and like from what I remember now, most of the signs were just sort of like, I would almost say not passive in a bad way, but just like neutral. They were just signs saying, here are our opinions, and we don't agree with what's going on, which, like, I think that's great to do that. At the same time, one sign in particular stood out to me, and it said something to the effect of, like, hexing, blah, 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 like, hexing these people that we don't agree with, which that goes into a whole nother area. What I wrote down here on the paper is justified might, or justified, like, aggression, like, revenge. And I've talked about that exhaustively. Um, Inherently is not something that I agree with at all. And I had this idea earlier that just made so much sense, but it's really like an ABC sort of thing. Typically, in a situation like this, you've got one person who is doing something, quote unquote, negative or bad, and there's hatred involved there. So if you then move yourself into a box where you say, I hate these people because they're acting on hate and ignorance, it's important to understand that now you've got hate up here with the people that you don't agree with, and now you have hate. So there's a connection there. It's hate. And maybe that hate isn't a good thing. Um, there again, I'm not saying that you should take up their cause, or aspire to be their friend, but I believe, at the very least, I want to believe that there's some means of resolution beyond taking your mind and your emotions into that place where you yourself are now creating negativity, and adding that darkness to the world, because I don't think that's the way at all. I'm not saying that there's an easy answer or an easy solution to some of these problems, because they're really complicated and screwed up. But I just really don't believe in justified violence, or justified hatred, or that sort of angst. It just doesn't speak to me as a truth, as a spiritual truth. So I could really go on and on about that, but I'm not going to, at least not in this video. I don't see the point in it. I will move on to something else that I came across. And this is sort of on a lesser note. It's detracted from those other things. How to put this into context? I believe this was from a blog post I read the other day, and so in this blog post, this person was talking about some things that they were doing in their life, and I'm not going to give any specifics here. There's no reason to do that. But I will use some very obscure examples that have nothing to do with the actual post. So let's say, for example, that this person was talking about being a banker, and they were like, well, okay, I'm a banker, and the reason why I do this is because I am this sort of person, etc., etc. So basically, they were talking about how their personality, and I'm putting that in quotations, their personality has led them on this life path of doing certain things and whatever. And to some degree, though, in the blog post, it was almost a thing of like limitation, of saying, oh, well, I can't do these things, or I can't be these things because it so conflicts with who I am. And that's really what I wanted to touch on or speak to. I'm at a place in my own life where I don't know how much stock I put into that sort of idea. Um, if you know who Grant Morrison is, then you have probably seen the uh, the little lecture slash talk that he did. It was years and years ago now. It was a disinfo lecture. You can go on YouTube and type in Grant Morrison disinfo and probably find it pretty easily. But in that lecture, most notably, he talks about sigil magic, but he gets into this whole part where he discusses like ego and personality in particular, and how like the whole thing is a really big illusion. And most of this is stuff that I agree with, and I think it comes down to there again. You create these preconceived notions of who you are and what you are, and the more that you feed into that, the more it becomes true in your own reality. But it's only true because you believe it. Um, Scientists have virtually now proven that the brain changes. Who we are, I really think that who we are isn't limited at all beyond like that conscious choice that we make, and I do believe that it comes down to a conscious choice. So I'm really stumbling through this, but it just comes down to like how to word that exactly. I'm not really sure. This ties into a larger thing that I wanted to touch on, but it's like Grant does a lot better job of going through this in his talk. Basically, it gets into this whole idea that if you wanted to be, as the example I used, a banker or a teacher, or, maybe you just wanted to go and live out in the wilderness somewhere, and live off the land. Like it's all about what you choose to do. And so if you say, well, I am this kind of person, etc., etc., you've created that box for yourself. And every day, with every thought that you have and every action, like you facilitate that, like you give it life. You perpetuate that is the better term. Um, So I'm trying to stress here that there's a choice. I think if you really look, seek within, you know, if you really look deep within yourself, you'll find that that is a truth. Um, so inherently, we can be anyone or anything that we want to be. Um, and I believe that to some degree, at least. Um, this is another thing, too, that I wanted to touch on, kind of sort of related to that, but only related in the intricate web of synchronicity and insanity that is this illusionary reality we live in. I wanted to touch on this same sort of blog situation thing. The individual was also talking about depression, and I had mentioned that I think obscurely and more so specifically in some of the blog posts that I've done. I have lived with depression hell for the last 20 years, you know, longer than that really, because I was depressed even before I was a teenager, you know. So to go further with that, I will say, no, I have lived with pretty severe depression and anxiety and lots of those sorts of issues for 20 years, unmedicated and without therapy. Um, and we're talking about anxiety and depression that has, not so much recently, but has um, been so extreme that it was quote unquote debilitating. I mean, you're talking about not, you know, wanting to be here on this planet, you know, and I mean, just not being able to exist at all. So I can only speak for me and what I've experienced and what I've gone through. Over the past, I would say, particularly the past like 5 or 6 years, I've been in a situation where I had events occur in my life that were sort of like signposts, you know, things that occurred. There was some universal learning and wisdom going on, like the universe showing up and saying, look, if you don't view some of these things and try consciously to work through them, you will never reach any of these goals that you have. I mean, you're just fucked if you don't. Sorry for the coarse language, but it's, you know, you're screwed if you don't do some work. Um, and for me, that work has been very, very, very slow, uh, and it's still ongoing. However, somewhere along the way, I started to understand some things about myself. Um, and a big part of that is how important choice is. Um, choice is not the only topic here, and I do want to touch, I better make a note of this so I don't forget, but I do also want to touch on how to word that. There's choice, and then there's choice, and then there's like, yeah, okay, yeah, there's like a deeper level going on, okay? So I may ramble about this for a little while, you just have to bear with me, but let's start there again, like I said, with choice. I think every moment, every second, every breath we take, inherently, to some degree, our consciousness, which I don't believe is in the head, I think it exists on another dimension, and we're sort of perceiving through this virtual reality suit. That's a whole other topic. Um, every moment, you as a conscious, creative being have a choice. You have a choice of how you feel, what you think. Most importantly, you have a choice as to how you perceive everything. And that may sound sort of hokey, but I mean it's the whole thing of like you wake up and you're gonna go do something. Maybe you decided that you were gonna, you know, go on a picnic that day, and you look out the window and it's raining. In that moment, you have a choice to view that whole thing and be like, okay, well, this sucks because I wanted to go on a picnic and now it's raining. What am I gonna do? Um, if you are someone who has a tendency toward depression, you can let that one thing spiral you into a dark, negative place. I mean, and that's your choice as a conscious being, if that's part of the path that you want to walk. But I think trying to get better starts there. It starts with those single choices every moment of every day. Now, let me be clear here. What I'm not saying is to numb yourself and to not feel, because that's not very good. It's not very healthy. Um, what I will interject, though, you can choose not only how you feel, but to what extremity. It's been my experience, here again, as someone who has a tendency toward depression and things like that. If I just let it go, I mean, if I just let it be what it is, then it does spiral. Like it's not a moderate feeling or emotion. Those things are pushed to the extremes, and they become interconnected. That one moment of negativity will start to color your view about the whole day. Like the whole world, the whole universe. Like it'll get, maybe not in an instant. It might take several hours or the rest of that day, but yeah, I keep harkening back to this choice. I think choice is involved. Um, I'm also going to add this in here. Let me be very clear. As I said earlier, this is my own personal path and experience. Another part of this choice, like making these choices and having that internal dialogue and awareness, that doesn't happen in a day's time. It takes a lot of willingness and a lot of practice. So I'm not saying to someone who's going through some of these experiences, oh, you should just wake up and make a choice. Like it's not that simple, and I realize that. What I am saying is that as a conscious being, you do have a choice, and if you try to work toward having more control over that choice, there's an option there for you to explore. There again, I'm not saying it will fix all your problems or make everything okay. Um, at all, but I'm saying, if you've spent 5 years dealing with severe depression and you've taken medication and you've gone to therapy and you've traveled down all these little routes, but this thing still exists, like this problem, maybe there's some alternatives. That's what occurred for me. Like I got to this place where I was like, Jesus Christ, what have I done with my life for the past 10 or 15 years? Like it's been one weird sort of event after another, and there have been moments of peace and goodness and relationships and being functional, and then there have also been this sort of roller coaster thing of like disaster and doom and like mania and hardship, and it's this weird fucking cycle. Like I need to get off the roller coaster, even if that means unplugging from the world and seriously dedicating myself to trying to work through some of this. And here we are. I mean, for me, like that's sort of how it went. Um, and that's why I wanted to mention that deeper level. There again, I'm not saying at all that medication or therapy, I'm not saying that those aren't viable um, avenues to explore. What I am saying is, if you've walked those avenues for an extended period of time and you have not noticed, what you consider to be a significant degree of betterment in your life, or whatever, maybe it's an idea to think, okay, like, this obviously isn't a fix. And I'm not saying necessarily there is a fix. I can speak from my own personal experience in saying the more that I practice this awareness of choice, and the more aware I am of how I feel, why I feel the way I feel, and determining for myself as a creative being what kind of experience I'm going to have, the less that depression and the mania and all the rest of it have existed to a degree. You um, there again, let me be very clear. This is not about numbing yourself to how you feel, but it's understanding that your perception of the world and these feelings, like there are loops and weird things going on, but it's not what it appears. I think most people really think, if it's raining outside and it ruined their picnic, then that's a justifiable reason to feel really sad and let that spiral you. It's not a reason. You may feel sad, but that doesn't have to govern your psyche, you know. You can feel sad and then let that go, have a warm cup of hot tea or coffee or whatever it is that you want to have, and do something good with your day. Like you have conscious choices rather than going down, that walk of going into darkness, you could say, or whatever. So that's kind of my point. Like, at any time, I'll keep repeating this over and over and over, you are a conscious, creative being. And your ability to manifest in this reality, to make choices and make changes both in yourself and in the world, it's far beyond what most people give themselves credit to be able to do. So yeah, that is kind of interconnected in what I mentioned earlier about those boxes. Like don't box yourself into something of like, oh, this is who I am, and so my level of comfortability or whatever, like I can only be these things. It's all bullshit. It's a joke, and it doesn't exist. It only exists if you allow it to exist, if you decide that it should exist. Um, and I think that's that. That's really the bulk of what I wanted to cover in this video. I may ramble a little further, I don't know, but I'm not sure how much personal stuff I want to include in this video. Like I said, things have been busy. I've been doing a lot of research and reading, and trying to focus on having that type of active practice, learning how to incorporate ritual and magic into the everyday stuff. And so that has been, a focus recently. Um, yeah. Still, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah. Uh, yeah, a lot of stuff to go through. Yeah, I mean, it's odd. Like, I'll share this with you. This is personal, so take it for what you will. Think of how to word this. Okay, so I watched a video earlier today, and this video was misleading, honestly. Well, not completely. The title was a bit misleading. So, but anyway, I went and watched it, and it was not what I expected it to be. Um, but in the video, these people were drinking and having a good time, and personally, I don't drink. There are reasons why. Uh, you know, alcoholism runs in my family, and I learned at a young age that if I were not very conscious of my drinking, that would be yet another problem compounding my depression and all the other stuff. Um, so I mean, yeah, somewhere years ago, I had this moment where I was like, that's it. Thankfully, it never got out of hand. There was a time in my 20s. I remember one specific day where I woke up, and it was like lunchtime, and my first thought was I want a beer, like I want to drink, and I sort of understood then, whoa, this is not cool. But yeah, several years ago, I was just like, I don't think I want to do that anymore for me personally. So I don't drink. One thing I will say, if you don't drink, or if you drink but you're sober and you're around other people who are drinking, it gives you this weird perspective because you're sort of conscious and you're thinking in a certain way, and it's separate oftentimes, from people who are drinking or have been drinking, and they're just like, very loose and having fun in that sort of way. So anyway, I'm watching this video today, and there are levels of it in my brain. Like there's a level where I'm like up here, and it's like, okay, these people are drinking and having a good time, and that's cool. And then there's this other level that's a little more complex, and it's like, I was gonna watch this video because it talked about some history of stuff, but there really wasn't any history. It was just a jest. So I mean, I'm kind of like, well, fuck. Um, so my point here about rambling about this is that it goes back to what I said earlier about learning something about yourself. There was this moment of realization of you have spent the last month really like and maybe a little longer than that, like doing this research, about magic and Wicca and getting back on your spiritual path. When I do something, I do it very seriously. Like I'm not there to waste time and I want to screw off. Like I have a goal and I'm going to work, and I really value that investment of time and energy. And I kind of look at it in that way. It's a very strict way. At the same time, part of my own spiritual development as a person, I need to learn how to have those, and it's not so much have, but allow myself to have those moments of just, being okay or watching something, just for the fun of it or just enjoying a moment. Um, it's, for me, what I find is that it's this weird schism. Um, how to describe this? It's like what I mentioned earlier about the depression and the mania and the darkness. As an individual, particularly as you get older, you'll look back at years past and you'll think, so much time has passed. There are things that I would have wanted to have accomplished during that time, and now I have this work ahead of me, because I wasn't doing the things I needed to do. And so all of this shit, all of what I'm saying now is like this mental construct that I've created in my brain. So, but because of that, I have this feeling now of like, I need to use and spend my time wisely, because so much was lost when I was, manic or dealing with a depression and didn't want to get out of bed or whatever. Like, so much time was lost. Um, and so you have this feeling of wanting to recapture some of that time and use your time in a better way. There again, it's all constructs. It's things that you tell yourself. It's these truths and these ideas that you create, and you have to be careful, to be aware beyond the things that you tell yourself, because a lot of it's bias and a lot of it's bullshit. There are some levels of personal truth, but I think to some degree you have to open up this part of your brain or this part of your brain, wherever it comes from. Like there's a space there. You can open it, and the universe, I genuinely believe, will speak to you. You'll have moments of deep insight and revelation, and from those things you can move forward and actually make some progress. Um, if you choose to. There again, it's all about choice. So yeah, I think that's about all I have. Um, I don't know that there are any other updates that I want to share right off. I don't think so. I don't believe so. Um, I don't know what the future will hold. I have a general idea of where I want to go and what I plan to do. That's another thing too that I'm currently working on. Uh, is this notion of getting out of these boxes of expectation? Trying to. I mentioned this in one of the podcasts. It's that whole notion of learning to float, to just float and let the river of life, quote unquote, take you where it will. Um, Certainly, I think it's a good idea to have goals, or to have an idea of what you want. but I think inherently within that, it's important to be flexible. Um, it's also important to admit, at the very least to yourself, what you think you want or you need may not be what you want or you need. And so, you know, if you grant or gift yourself some allowance and some leeway there, some flexibility, you may find that life and situations manifest different things. I've had really odd dreams recently. Um, I think I mentioned it in one of the podcasts, the dream that I had about the 40 days. If I didn't mention it in the podcast, I posted about it both in some of the groups that I'm in and on some forums and stuff. And I need to go back. My brain is scattered, and I don't think that 40 days has passed since that time. But I still haven't found much information about that, or I don't have any clarity on that. So, but yeah, the dreams that I've had recently have not been to that degree. That dream seemed real, uh, to the extent that, like, when I woke up, I was shaking, and I felt like I had been visited, like by some being or some presence or entity. Like I did not wake up with this feeling of having a nightmare, because it wasn't necessarily bad at all, but it was this power and this sort of internal knowing of something significant happened in this dream. Like it likely wasn't a dream as we want to think of dreams. I think sometimes we just dream and it's our mind, running bullshit, or it's our subconscious trying to speak to us. This was different, whatever it was. But the dreams I've had recently have not been like that. So, but they've had their odd moments. And I decided that I wanted to try to start keeping a dream journal. There again, that takes a lot of discipline. So yeah, I'm kind of fumbling my way through that, but I got a notebook, so I made a step. Um, I have experimented a lot recently with doing meditation. I've tried to get to a place where that's a daily practice, and trying different types, trying to figure out what resonates with me. Um, a lot of times when I personally do meditation, I will use um, music from YouTube or videos, and there was a video that I listened to when I did my meditation last night, and this girl was using, what was it, the Tibetan singing bowls. And I mean, the video was okay, it wasn't necessarily good or bad, but like, there was a certain moment when she struck the bowl and it had a certain resonance. And literally, I'm laying on my bed and I felt like a shift, I don't know how to describe it to you. Like, I had the lights off, my eyes closed, and I was relaxed. But when that vibration, that resonance occurred, like I felt something. So, but I don't know how to put whatever that was into context. Um, and I re-listened to the video today, like sitting in the computer chair, very lucid, and I kind of I felt like a minute resonance. It wasn't the same thing that I experienced, during the meditation. So I don't know if that was, just a tone that resonated with me, or I have to look further into that. I've been experimenting more recently with ritual, and I found that to be interesting as well. I enjoy it. It is challenging to me. My memory is not what it should be, so I find that I have to, keep the book with me in my circle, to read from it. Eventually, likely, I will get to a place where the rituals that I do are adopted. Like I want to take some of the structure and the understanding from some of these things that I've read, and make it my own in my own way, so that it's more powerful to me and my subconscious. Um, Ultimately, that is the goal. I don't know how long that'll take or how much work that'll involve. The thing I mentioned earlier about the videos on that group called GuardCon, this woman, I don't remember her name. I want to say it's Deb Lib, or I don't remember because there again, my memory is pretty horrendous. But anyway, she does a series of videos there about the structure of spell casting, which, I mean, that video was okay. It was interesting to hear her point of view. She all like years ago she did another series about raising power, and that video really spoke to me, and I really enjoyed that. So you can look for that and check that out if you're interested in that subject matter. Um, yeah, I think I've rambled on enough. Depending, like, this isn't technically a live video. Um, I don't know how to word that to you. It's recorded live, um, but I've got the settings on private, so no one is actually viewing it while it's being streamed. Um, and that is probably the format that I will use, at least until, you know, I have some moment of wanting to change that. My computer screen is kind of far away. It would be very difficult for me to see the chat, and I don't know that I'm ready to engage that way yet. But I do hope to do future videos, and I'm not going to make any promises on when, or where, or any of that. Like, it'll be what it'll be. Um, but if you follow me on Twitter or, Facebook, or if we're interconnected in some way within the universe, then you'll see these posts. I'll probably post this to Facebook and FetLife and Twitter and all sorts of places. So I do hope that all of you are well. Um, I hope some of this made some sense to you, and I hope at the very least, even if you disagreed with some of the views that I shared, I hope that you allow yourself to take a moment and examine some of the things I've said and see if there is any, relevance to you in your own life. Certainly feel free to leave some comments down below as long as they're meaningful and constructive. There again, if you disagree, that's totally okay as long as you're not rude about it. I try not to be rude toward other people, and I tend not to invest in that kind of dialogue. So I'm more likely to delete a comment if it goes in that direction. But yeah, I hope all of you are well, and I will talk to you soon, hopefully.